In this video, we're going to explore how to add IAM entities such as IAM User and IAM Role to the AWS EKS cluster. First of all, we're going to create a developer user and grant read-only access to the EKS cluster. This user will get permissions to view nodes and workloads from the AWS console, as well as be able to get pods, deployments, and other objects in Kubernetes. To do that, we will create RBAC reader group in Kubernetes and bind developer IAM User to that group by modifying EKS auth config map. This approach works well if you have a small number of users that need access to the EKS cluster. If you have a large team, every time you want to add a new user, you need to modify EKS auth config map, which is not very convenient. A better approach would be to create IAM role and allow users that need to access the Kubernetes cluster to assume that role. In that way, you only need to bind IAM role with the Kubernetes RBAC system only once via EKS auth config map. To test it, we will create a manager IAM user and allow it to use EKS admin role with full access from the AWS side as well as Kubernetes itself. You can find the source code, all IAM policies and commands that I run in terminal in the GitHub repository and in a blog post. Let's start with RBAC, role-based access control. Create cluster role with read-only access to the Kubernetes cluster. You can specify any resources and verbs that you want to grant access to. In this case, the user will be able to get, list and watch deployments, config maps, pods, secrets and services. To bind this cluster role to identity, you need to create a cluster role binding object. Under the subject, specify group reader. If you want to grant access to a single namespace, you can create a role instead. In a role, the rules are applicable to a single namespace, whereas a cluster role gives you a cluster-wide access. Let's go to the terminal and apply this RBAC policy with kubectl. The next step is to create IAM policy to let users view nodes and workloads for all clusters in the AWS management console. This policy has effect allow for the following actions. Also, you can restrict access to a specific EKS cluster by specifying the resource. Give it a name, Amazon EKS View Nodes and Workloads policy, and click Create Policy. We can attach IAM policy directly to the IAM user or follow the best practice and create IAM group first. Let's call it Developers and attach Amazon EKS View Nodes and Workloads policy. You can filter by customer managed policies to get only policies that we created. Then we need IAM User. Let's create one and call it Developer. We're going to place it in the developers IAM group with read-only access. Don't forget to download credentials. We will use them to configure AWS profile. Now we need to create a local AWS profile using developers user credentials. To do that, simply add profile flag to AWS configure command. Then copy and paste the access key ID and a secret access key. To map IAM users with Kubernetes RBAC system, we need to modify AWS auth config map. Open the config map and add IRN of the IAM user under map users key. You can grab the IRN of the user from the AWS console. We're going to map this user with a reader group that we created earlier. Now we need to switch to the developer user. We need to update the Kubernetes context using the developer's profile. Don't forget to update the region and the cluster name. You can verify the Kubernetes context that you use the developer's profile to interact with the EKS cluster. Under the env, you should see AWS profile equal to developer. By now, we have created RBAC policy with read-only access and mapped it to the IAM developer user. Let's see what we can do in our cluster now. You can run kubectl auth can verb and then object to verify access. First, let's check if we can get pods in Kubernetes cluster. The response should be yes. Then let's check if we can create pods in Kubernetes. The answer should be no. You can also try to create a pod. You should get the forbidden error. Now let's add IAM role to the EKS cluster. First of all, let's create IAM policy with admin access to EKS clusters. The following policy will allow you to view information on configuration tab in the console. To view information on nodes and workloads in the AWS management console, you need additional IAM permissions as well as Kubernetes permissions. Give it a name Amazon EKS admin policy. Then create EKS admin IAM role and attach Amazon EKS admin policy that you just created. Select another AWS account and enter your account ID. You can copy it from this section. Same thing here. Filter by customer managed policies and select Amazon EKS admin policy. Give it a name EKS admin and click create. Optionally, you can describe the EKS admin role to check who can use it. Potentially, any IAM user can assume this role from this account if they have appropriate policy in place. For any user that wants to use EKS admin IAM role, we need to create additional policy that allows them to assume the role. Effect allow, then action assume role and a resource equal to IRN of the role. Then any user that has this policy can use the EKS admin IAM role. To test it, we need another IAM user. Let's create a manager user and allow it to use EKS admin IAM role. In this case, just attach Amazon EKS assume EKS admin policy directly to the user. We need to download credentials as well. The same thing for this user. We need to create a manager's AWS profile. You can check if the manager user can assume the EKS admin role by running the following command. Specify the IRN of the role and a user's profile. If we get credentials back, it means we can use it. Now we need to switch back to the user that created the EKS cluster. When you emit the profile, AWS will use the default one. You can also use kube-context tool to switch between Kubernetes contexts. It's a very similar process to add IAM role. You also need to update the AWS auth config map. In this case, we will use Kubernetes airbag group systems masters that ships with the cluster. You can get the IRN of the role from the console as well. Finally, to test IAM role, we need to create EKS admin profile config to assume the role by the manager user. You need to add it to AWS config, IRN of the IAM role and the user's profile that will use it. In this case, manager. Now update Kubernetes context to automatically assume EKS admin role by the manager user. You can check the context with the following command. You can see profile equals to EKS admin. Check if the manager user has admin access to the EKS cluster. The first star is a verb such as to get, list, etc. The second one is the object such as deployments, secrets, etc. The response should be yes. You can also try to create a pod using the previous command. Alright, that's all for this video. If you want more like that, subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one.